11:16 now. Welcome back. The Grateful Dead at Rich Stadium, Fabio at Pilot Field, and a panic over Pepsi. Dave McKinley has our weekly look back in time when all those stories and more were all news to you.
10 years ago this week.
The government is working, and it is working better than it has worked in years.
Except for two state audits, one which showed the state was paying millions in unemployment benefits to hundreds of people who were dead and others who had jobs working for the state of New York. And another audit showed that for $7 billion in tax breaks for development schemes authored by the Cuomo administration, there was no oversight. Meanwhile, 1 year after his world-famous walk over the falls, there was hope that Nick Wallenda would establish some sort of permanent attraction in the Cataract City. An idea no closer to fruition today as it was this week in 2013. 20 years ago this week, and less than a year after opening their first casino in the Falls, the Seneca were ready to move on the development of a second one in Buffalo. Though locations like the Old Odd and the Statler were being pushed by local officials, the Seneca had their eyes instead on something more to their liking.
Square footage, location, that type of thing. The building structure. And
this week's News to You pop quiz: where were the Seneca proposing to put their Buffalo casino this week in 2003? Remember, this was back when Britain's Prince Harry here was just graduating from high school, when Arnold Schwarzenegger was running for governor of California.
I'll be back.
When disgraced figure skater Tanya Harding was giving professional boxing a go, when North Tonawanda police cars were still sporting a red, white, and blue livery, and when we lost both actor Gregory Peck.
It was the role of Atticus Finch that elevated Peck to legendary status and finally earned him an Oscar.
And legendary newsman David Brinkley.
Good night, Chet. Good night, David.
This week in 2003. 30 years ago this week, when bread was 69 cents a loaf, when Tom and Roseanne Arnold were still married, but for not much longer, and President Clinton introduced Ruth Bader Ginsburg as his Supreme Court nominee. The top-selling item at the Allentown Arts Festival were those metal plant hooks, and at Pilot Field, well, it was easier to list who was not at Jim Kelly's annual Stargaze fundraiser for Cradle Beach Camp than who was.
Quarterbacks: Dan Marino, Warren Moon. There was Donald Trump mingling with Fabio.
That same week, the Grateful Dead were playing at Rich Stadium among fans who may have been consuming any number of substances, although Pepsi may not have been among them, because this was the week that what appeared to be the most infamous product tampering case in U.S. history blew up, when people across the country were reporting syringes in cans of the soft drink. Some folks were really shaken up.
Will you continue to buy Pepsi out of cans and drink it now?
That's debatable.
I don't think so.
Why?
Well, because there might be needles in there.
Others weren't so worried.
I'm afraid to walk on Elmwood worse than I am to buy a can of Pepsi.
Well, it turned out there was nothing to worry about. The whole scare was made up.
In California, Michigan, Illinois, Missouri, more people admitted they faked their claims about finding things in cans like this.
A hoax perpetrated at first by a few, then numerous other copycats, many of whom ended up facing charges back in the days when... mullets. Back in the days when it was all news to you.
All right, here's the answer to this week's News to You pop quiz. We asked you if you remembered where the Senecas originally proposed building their casino in Buffalo. The answer: the Buffalo Convention Center. The Senecas proposed taking one floor for gaming, but then convention center management opposed the idea, worried that certain groups, like those tied to religious or school groups, would not want to hold their conventions in a building that also had a casino in it. So the Senecas eventually built their Buffalo Creek Casino on Michigan Avenue instead.